Hi guys, today we're going to talk about a city that's located just south of Rome. Of course, we're studying the Roman civilization. And this city-state was called Pompeii and experienced this catastrophic volcanic eruption in the year 79 AD. I'm going to tell you the story of what happened and why it turned into such a catastrophic event. The people, the citizens, were entirely unprepared for this situation. So let's get into this. I'm going to show you some cool stuff, some videos and pictures today. So let's find out exactly where I'm talking about. You guys know, I hope you remember, that Rome is right around here in Italy. And this is just zoomed in for you to show you where Pompeii is located at. Vesuvius is to the north, so right about here on this map. And of course, it's got this city-state Herculaneum next to it. And you would think that Herculaneum would have suffered like much greater than what Pompeii did, but they didn't. And I'm going to tell you why as we get a little further into this. So let's find out what Pompeii was actually like. Pompeii was this rich city that was full of really cool stuff, lots of things to do. It was a vacation hotspot for rich Romans. They would go there and hang out during holidays and have their vacation there. The Emperor Nero had a vacation home there. Remember Nero? We talked about him a couple of sections ago in this chapter. He was the really violent emperor that they had. He was a bad guy and killed a bunch of people in his family. So they are pretty advanced, right? This is the year 79 AD. We have crossed over the year 0. We're in Anno Domini, right? AD stands for Anno Domini. And these people are a lot like us. They don't have necessarily all the technology that we have today. They don't have electricity and that kind of stuff yet, but they are a lot like us. So they've got wooden buildings like we do. They had an outdoor amphitheater. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. They had 2 indoor theaters. This was not like Showplace 16. They could not go there to watch the latest and greatest Star Wars movie. This was an indoor theater to go see a live play. They had lots of temples that were there, and they had this pretty intricate aqueduct water system. If you guys remember back a couple chapters, we were talking about aqueducts, that it's kind of like this man-made river. It's elevated, it's built out of brick or stone, and it's like, 2 to 3 feet wide, and probably 3 feet off of the ground, and water flows through it. And that aqueduct runs all through a city, and you go out there with your buckets or your pottery, whatever you have, and scoop water out of that. So it's like plumbing for houses, but it doesn't come into your house unless you're super rich or you're the king and you live at the palace. Then the aqueduct would come right up to your house for you. But for everybody else, you had to kind of walk out to the main part of town to get to the aqueduct. All right, so here is a picture of this amphitheater from Pompeii, which is bigger than what you actually think by just looking at the photo. So historians think that it seated about 20,000 people. This is a little bit on the small side. The Colosseum, when you think of the Colosseum that everybody thinks of from Roman times, where like a big chunk of it has broken off. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. That one would seat about 50,000 people. So this is a lot smaller than that, but 20,000 people is a lot of people still. And they would go there for gladiator events. I think you guys knew that by my pictures I have on there. It's a very, very popular form of entertainment. Remember, ancient Romans, people from Pompeii, they would go and watch these gladiator fights like we go and watch a football game or a baseball game or basketball, soccer, whatever. It was entertainment. It was something fun to do. Nobody saw it as being a weird or, like inappropriate thing. They didn't see it that way back then. So this was a hot thing to go and do. Now in the year 59, remember Nero has a home that's in Pompeii, and things had really gone wild down at the amphitheater. 2 different gladiators were fighting who were from 2 different towns. And people from each of those towns had come to Pompeii to watch this fight. And they were so worked up and the citizens got out of control. They began fighting with each other in the stands. And Nero said, that's it, no more gladiator fights. And he stopped the gladiator fights and all activity at the amphitheater for 10 years, which is a long time. All right, so let's look at Mount Vesuvius, which sits just to the north of the city-state of Pompeii. It is a huge volcano. It's called a stratovolcano, which means that it's a deadly volcano, a very dangerous volcano. Some volcanoes aren't very active, but this one actually is. A stratovolcano is defined by its shape. So it comes in relatively flat, and then at the last part, it has this steep incline, kind of like a beaker, or you guys think of like a graduated cylinder that you use in science class, how it's got the base and then it's got this neck that comes up really sharp. That's kind of how this volcano is. The eruptions are deadly because in this particular one, because it's a stratovolcano and because it has a lot of lava inside of it that moves very, very fast. It's an active volcano. It is still an active volcano. Lots of minor eruptions go on around this volcano all the time, but the last major eruption took place in 1944. And if you stick with me on this video, I am going to show you a video clip of that eruption in 1944. But let's get back to this eruption that happened in the year 79 AD. So we know about this eruption because this guy, he was an author. He was writing a journal entry as he was watching the eruption happen from another city-state. That man's name was Pliny the Younger. And he said that it happened sometime in late August, but based on some of the artifacts that have been recovered, we think that it was probably closer to maybe October or November, because some of the things indicated that it was cooler weather than what it would have been in August. It could have just been a cold day, but most facts are leading towards later in the fall. All right, so scientists have taken this information that Pliny put together, and they have projected based on experiment and the facts that he's provided that the projectiles went so high that it took a certain amount of power to get them that high up into the air. And they are guesstimating that that volcanic eruption was 500 times more explosive than the atomic bombs that we dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in World War II, which is just incredible. According to Pliny's journals, the eruption continued on for more than 24 hours. So we can think about this ash information. Ash was falling at a rate of about 6 inches per hour for 2 straight days. 20 feet of ash in some places in Pompeii. We have some kind of experience with something kind of like this because we have snowstorms here, right? And so when we think about how fast snow falls, sometimes you'll hear, that you're getting like 1 to 2 inches of snow an hour, which is a lot of snow in an hour. 6 inches is incredible. If we were getting 6 inches of snow an hour, think about that. In 2 hours, we could have a foot of snow. That's just unheard of. So this is a lot of ash that's coming down. So what happens, it wasn't the lava that actually killed people. Most people died from this explosion, from the heat, the intense heat. And the ash was spewing out of the volcano, right? So small bits of lava are turning into ash into the air. And what happened, I showed you that map at the very beginning with that city-state Herculaneum, which was directly to the west of Mount Vesuvius. What happened is the wind had blown a different direction that day. Normally, wind is carried with the jet stream and it goes from west to east. But what happened for whatever reason that day, the wind was blowing to the south, which was just very, very peculiar to happen at all. So the wind was blowing to the south and it blew all of this ash directly into the city-state of Pompeii. It's believed that there's somewhere around 1,000, between 1,000 and 1,500 people who died in the city. We have recovered more than 1,000 people out there and exploring what is left of Pompeii. But we still have about a third of the city-state to actually explore and find out what's there. So let's look at this. I want to show you the explosion that happened, or the eruption that happened in 1944. I don't know if you're going to get any sound of it, but we'll see. All right, so there isn't any sound, but this is Vesuvius. Of course, in the 1940s, we had cameras. This is Vesuvius exploding. It was actually during World War II when this happened, where in Italy, you guys know that in Europe, of course, that's where the majority of the war was taking place because of what was happening in Germany, which is not terribly, terribly far from Italy. And so a lot of this was recorded because a lot of pilots and a lot of fighter aircraft actually had people who were documenting the war with cameras inside their planes. And that's why we have such good video footage of what actually happened. So you can see there's a lot of gas, a lot of lava, a lot of gas. We don't get to see as much of the ash part in this video, and it probably had to do with the fact that there just wasn't the amount of wind that had happened on the day that Pompeii had their eruption. All right, let's switch back. All right, so Pompeii is covered with all of this ash. And the city-state sat after that eruption in 79 AD. It sat there for more than 1,500 years. No one went to the city-state, and no one had any idea what had happened there once that original or initial time period had passed. The reason that someone had gone there was an architect who was trying to design a new Roman aqueduct water system for the city-state of Herculaneum. And he traveled south to try to figure out how to expand this water system and came upon Pompeii. No one went there, even though he found it. No one went there for an additional 30 years because it was such a mess. It was dangerous to be in and breathing in all that ash. And because they knew that there had been so many people who had actually died and were like buried in the ash, they did not return. So I want to show you some artifacts that were recovered from there. We've only been exploring this area maybe for the last 100, 150 years, which isn't that long when you think about this site is, almost 2,000 years old. So, of course, we've got money and we've got different kinds of decorative vases and drinking vessels, jewelry. This was, you cooked inside there. Like you could cook a pizza or a pie or something or bread, whatever, and you slide it in there, set it inside there, and then bring it back out and cook through this hole to stick stuff in there. All right. This is a petrified apple, right, from Pompeii. You guys have seen this picture before. This was the petrified bread. What happens is there was so much ash that comes down, it buries these things and they don't catch on fire, but instead they just get charred. What we have here is kind of a cool new thing that was actually just discovered in the last year. Now, while this doesn't really look like much, what it is called a thermopolia. And they have found more than 80 of these. Look at all this packed in ash. That's what this is over top of this. This is settled ash that's been weathered. And so they have a lot to dig through. But what this is like fast food. It is ancient fast food. It was a countertop, and behind the countertop they found jars that would have held different kinds of foods and meats. And so we think that they had something kind of like a food court. There was more than 80 of them where you could go and get different kinds of foods and drinks and snacks and things like that, which is kind of cool to think of for ancient times. Okay, so in the rest of this ash, they wanted to find out what was there. And what they were discovering is that as they walked around to different areas, they would find hollow spots in the ash. Now, the ash had gotten really hard, like I just showed you, but they knew that there were some hollow areas. So they decided they were going to make plaster cast. And what that means is they're going to inject liquid, kind of mushy clay-like plaster into these hollow pockets and then let it dry and find out what that thing actually was. So they fill in these pockets, and this is what they found. Now I'm going to just tell you what it is. So if you're uncomfortable with this, seeing this, you probably want to stop the video. What they found was people and animals that had died. So their bodies had disintegrated, but the shape, the hollow shape, actually held their shape for a long time. So I'm going to show that to you if you don't think that you want to see it. It's not gross, but it might be a little bit disturbing to some people. You don't have to watch it. If you want to see it, stay with me. So Pompeii is a tourist destination today, and these people are on a tour looking at some of these recoveries, these cast from the hollow pockets in the ash. So this is not a real person. This is just the plaster mold that came out of the hollow pocket. And you'll find that lots of people and animals were in these, just almost they sat down and just gave up. They knew that they couldn't escape it. And it's just fascinating to look at some of these plaster cast. If you guys find this interesting, I would encourage you to go to Google and see what you can find on Mount Vesuvius. I hope you found this to be interesting today. Thanks for joining me. Everybody have a good one.